Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to Conversations in Pop Culture. I have with me Russell Nohelty. So, welcome. I'm super excited to have you on.
I am very excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
Me too, me too. So, just to give everybody a little background, you are a New York Times bestselling author who has written the Godverse series 1 through 5 so far, Katrina Hates the Dead, Dust, and several standalone novels, as well as a few other graphic novels, including Ichabod Jones, Monster Hunter, Gherkin Boy, and The Dollar of Destiny. I probably said that wrong. And you
No,
also
it's
worked on a
right. It's
few
just like no one ever brings
anthologies.
Gherkin Boy up. But yes, I did write it. I drew that one. I should say I'm a USA Today best-selling author, not a New York Times best-selling author.
Fair enough, fair enough. And a few other works you've worked on as well, including the anthology Cthulhu is Hard to Spell, and that's a fact by itself. So I'm super excited to have you on, but I think the place to start is with Godverse, or Godsverse, and more of the prose side of that, because I think it's the closest to COVID-19, that entire series. So where did this idea come from?
So it had its genesis in comics, actually. So the Godsverse consists of four collections and two graphic novels. The first book is "And Demons Followed Behind Us," and that one is free. I pulled it out of the collection just so it could be on its own. But it started with a book called "Katrina Hates the Dead," which is about a girl who gets sick of living during the apocalypse, who sets out to hell to kill the devil. Easily my best-selling book until the Pixie Dust book, which is also in the Godsverse. So the second book in the Godsverse is Pixie Dust, which is about a pixie who comes back from the dead to seek revenge on the king that killed her. And those two books were the nascent stages of the Godsverse. Two books set against two devils, 3,000 years apart from each other, and the universe built out from there to the 12 books across four collections. There's actually a fifth book that I just wrote, a brand new book that has all of them in a sort of an Avengers style team up. But the idea is that I novelized both Katrina Hates the Dead and Pixie Dust, and they're part of the collections. And Death followed behind her, and Doom followed behind her, and Hell followed behind her, and Ruin followed behind her. And there's 12 total stories across those four collections, and it's basically uh, what if all the gods were real, but they were just kind of dicks? I guess is sort of the premise. So my big thing is mythology, monsters, and magic, and these books have tons of all of that stuff. So Katrina is sort of the first book, and the idea of the entire universe is that when a habitable world is formed, all gods come to make sure that it is sustainable. And then once a world is sustainable, those gods leave and leave one regent in charge. And the regent that we have gotten stuck with is Bacchus, who's a vain drunk. He turned all of the temples that were supposed to be to the many, many gods into one god himself. And he made up lies like that he was omniscient, omnipotent, and omnibenevolent, which like I look around and I'm like, no way a god has all three of them. So it's got to be like this guy's just a vain drunk who like doesn't know what he's doing. And that was the genesis of the Godsverse, and then it built out from there. So in the Katrina series, Katrina book, you really see sort of the expansion from the apocalypse. In the first book, she sets out to kill the devil. In the second book, the Greek gods. In the third book, the Titans. And then in the second book, in Doom followed behind her, the main character Rebecca Lobdell has to kind of clean up all of Katrina's mess, and Hell followed behind her follows three books with Octa and the origins of Hell, or like the history of Hell, and Ruin followed behind her follows one of Octa's descendants, Julia Freeman, as she sort of lives in the 70s to the 90s, and how Hell kind of built up as it was about to pop for the apocalypse. So if you read all four books, all 12 stories, you get 12 standalone novels, but you also get a sense of kind of the breadth of the world as it goes from 3,000 years in the past to 10,000 years in the future.
And one of the things that I like about this is you said this sort of came out of comics, and you do have two graphic novels. Katrina Hates the Dead, which is graphic novelized, I guess, for lack of a better word. And then you also have Pixie Dust, which tells the story of And Hell Followed Behind Her, and the first part of that. And Akka getting revenge on the king and the entire poison situation. And that to me is very cool because I like when books and mediums transcend their original medium that they were placed in and then go into a new version. So what was that like? Because that to
It
me is
was
extremely fascinating, and also it goes out and captures a whole new reader base.
Absolutely. So it was really cool, actually. What happened was I created Katrina. I wrote the story in 2011, or 10, 11 timeframe, and we finished it in 2013. It was originally going to come out from Allegory, and then that didn't work out. So I put it as a Kickstarter, and literally the minute that it started, it was like like it just exploded. It was easily our best-selling book, and people would read it and tell me they wanted more. They had questions about the Godsverse. They had questions about Katrina and what happened, and what happened after the end of the story. And it's expensive to make a comic, and I just wasn't ready to make that commitment. So for years, I just said, I'm not gonna. You're on your own. Like, I don't know, figure it out. But from that, people asked me about the universe, and so I kind of built out this kind of out of my ass at the beginning, just like the buildup of the universe, like what the backstory was and the whole thing, and that people liked that, like what I came up with, and so I just kept going down that rabbit hole again and again and again, and deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper, and that led to the construction of hell and the secession of devils, and that led to pixie dust, and that led to just me finally being like, all right, like this is. Like there's a lot to mine here, and the people really wanted to hear about like what the mythology behind this world that I had constructed. And so the first step was I made and Demon followed behind her is the novelization of Katrina Hates the Dead, and that's the one that's free. So it builds out a bunch of parts of Katrina that I didn't have the budget to go into at the time. So at the end of issue 2, when she leaves for hell, and issue 3, when she arrives at the Hell Rift, just like there's no information. There's no information about where she's from. There's no information about any of those parts. So I really went in and I built out all of that stuff. There's a demon called Thomas, who like is an ex-lover of Katrina's, and I built out like his backstory and their backstory together, why Connie and Katrina hated each other, how Barry became a zombie, all of these like questions that people had asked me. I just was able to go into depth, and then I was able to really build out everything else that happened in the universe, and it was really like a cool experience. First, to just get a chance to right any wrongs from the graphic novel, expand on a bunch of stuff, but then to take that basically one book, because it started as one, like it was Katrina Hates the Dead, and that was it. Like I didn't know it was going to become like a phenomenon in and of itself. So I figured that Katrina was Katrina, and like it was going to be a thing, and it was my Kevin Smith moment, like that and Ichabod. We're like, well, if I lost $20,000, then like whatever, at least I have done it. But then they both caught on, and it's been amazing. But yeah, it was great to see Katrina and then add in pixie dust and then get questions about what happened between the two, and then like kind of add in Julia Freeman's part, and add in like how the hell went from Velasca to Lucifer, and the succession before Velasca and Hades and Anubis and all of these people who kind of got not necessarily tricked, but like became this succession of hell, and how all of the gods kind of interact together. What's interesting about the Godsverse, though, is the gods are never the main character. The humans are always the main character, and it's really their position to the gods and their relation to their own destiny and their fate that these people are railing against. So it's really fun in a time when I don't. It's very hard to think about the like having any agency in your own life when you're stuck inside, to fall into these characters who like basically are all agency. Like all of them are like just these proactive badasses who take the world into their own hands.
And so to go through this, because in many ways this sort of started out as an experiment and you just throwing caution to the wind to some degree. And you said it yourself, it was almost like that Kevin Smith Clerks moment, and then all of a sudden it's taking off and it's happening, and now you have this entire universe to play with, and you've added things and you've expanded on things. What is that like for you to really have such a positive reaction to all of the material you've created for this? Because that doesn't always happen.
It doesn't. Well, I mean, I was ready to just walk away from Katrina, and like, I had said my piece. What I really wanted was to make a satire of all of the things I love and hate about apocalypse movies. So Katrina is about a girl who's lived in the apocalypse for 2 years and gets sick of it and sets out to kill the devil. And usually all these apocalypse movies like are happening right when the apocalypse starts. And so I wanted to see like what would happen if I just bypassed that the whole time. And I figured like, I don't know, like, or is anyone going to care about that? Like, maybe this is what people care about, and like they just want to see the same story told out 100 times before. And then I really wanted to add the mythology part. So like, I really wanted it to kind of be a satire on my version of Left Behind, and so I wanted to show like, God wasn't necessarily the good guy. The devil wasn't the bad guy. Everyone has their own story, and it's kind of up to you to figure out like what the actual truth is and like who the real like bad guy is in this whole story, and to keep flipping it on its head. And to see just 12 books and now 13 books basically of just like me doing the same thing over and over again and people enjoying it. It's kind of freaky, man. Like I feel like every book that I come out to is more and more pressure because I fear that I'm going to break everything. I feel like I'm going to have Game of Thrones season 8 syndrome, and just like one time they're going to be like, well, this is it. Like the books, like the whole series is horrible now. And so it's a lot of fun. I'm constantly surprised that people buy my work at all. I love it. Don't get me wrong. Like it's great. And I put a lot of work into the books, and like, I do think that they're like world-class books, but like, this is just like nonsense out of my head. Like, it's not even like realistic. It's like mythological creatures crashing together with religion and like politics and like every third rail subject that you could possibly have. I mean, like in universe, like God is a drunk who is also a Greek god. Like, it's kind of so blasphemous that I'm waiting for like the Mother's League or something to come out and do it. But the fact that people keep like letting me make them is pretty freaking incredible. And that goes also for Ichabod, but Katrina and the Godsverse especially, because it's a new medium. Like it's not no longer comics. It's comics and these novels. And I have no intention of making them to be comics again. It's like, if you love Katrina and Octa, you really are going to have to get invested in novels, because I'm planning to write at least 10 of them if people read them, and more, because they're just so fun. They're just so fun and like easy to write, and like they don't take the intricate plotting and detail. It's just like these girls just freaking like are forces of nature. And it's nice to like, I feel like I have control of my own life when I'm writing them, because like they are so capable. And on one hand, it's really hard to write that character because like, what do they go up against when they're so capable? On the other hand, it's like, it's so nice to see these characters just like not flinch in the face of adversity, because like I flinch all of the time, and I feel like over the years I've gotten courage from these women as they've like gone through me and spoken through me.
And now I want to table that right there, because I think we beat it with a sledgehammer, and I don't want to take anything away, because if we keep diving down, we're going to ruin so many things here.
Yeah, it's true.
But I do want to talk about the other stuff, and Ichabod is one of the things that I thoroughly enjoyed reading. It's more my cup of tea. I love it. It's almost like Glass to some degree, is the best way how I describe it. And if I was to sell it to somebody, it's like that movie. And it's dealing with a lot of stuff: mental health, derangedness, psychological problems, some degree justification, doing the right thing or what you think is the right thing. And there is a very fine line on hitting that target, and very few people can. And I don't know what more I can say without ruining too much, but really
Well,
interesting book. So where did that idea come from? Because that's beyond fascinating what this deals with.
oh, thank you so much. Yeah, Ichabod is my most beloved book by my fans. Ichabod is Katrina is my most popular, but people talk the most about Ichabod. Still, 10 years later, some people have read it and still can't get it out of their head. So, Ichabod is my big screw you to publishing. I did a book called The Wannabes, and I brought it to Comic-Con in 2010, and it was roundly rejected. It was about fake superheroes who got real superpowers, and I got all of what you would expect in 2010. Like, why would I buy a superhero book when I could get it from Marvel and DC? Yada 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 around the line. So I came back and I was like, well, if I'm not gonna like sell a book, I'm not gonna sell like a really weird book. I'm just gonna like go nuts and like make the least likely hero possible. But I didn't want to make the standard, psychopath who is violent and like has no morals. We've seen that guy before. We've seen that guy in comics before. I didn't think there was anything new there. What I thought was interesting was a world where the character thought he was doing the right thing and then was proven like objectively not to have done the right thing. Like, I don't think there's any more proof than being than being sentenced to an insane asylum for killing people. Like even his delusions were proven wrong, and then to have him go back again into these delusions and have to deal with the fact that he's probably crazy, but like, what if he's not? And he still like. There's a part of the beginning where this big monster is chasing after him. And like, what does he do? Does he like run away from the monster? Or does he like let it kill him? Like, what if it's real? And that's the whole thing that I loved about this world. It's like, he's in an impossible situation. He knows that he's been told that he's crazy. He's been told he's objectively evil in the eyes of society, but he can't stop. He can't he finds these people that like need help and he has to help them, and he finds these monsters that want to kill them, and like he has to do this thing even though it's against everything society's taught him to do. And it was really hard because we just went back and did issue 4 to 8 and Ichabod, and we actually did 9 and 10. We're in the middle of 10, so by the end of this year there should be 3 volumes of Ichabod. And it was really hard to go back and write volume 2 and volume 3 of Ichabod because I was in such a dark place. It was the lowest point in my writing career, easily the lowest point in my writing career, and I was in such a bad place, and I couldn't go back there again. Like, just for my own mental health, when I went back to issue 5 and 6 and 7 and 8, I had to find a way to get you to love Ichabod, but like a different version of Ichabod, a version of Ichabod that really leaned into the redemption arc of Ichabod, that leaned into like the fact that he's a reluctant hero, and the fact that the thing that I love about Ichabod is that he is a hero in this place, not despite his brokenness, but like because of it. Like the things that everyone has always told him were broken about him are the things that made him a hero. And like, that's, to me, that's what made the story beautiful when I like really redid it, is this character is objectively evil in the eyes of society, and yet he's still trying to do the right thing, and he's still trying to redeem himself. And he's still like his ability to kill without really feeling bad about it, and to like his non-aversion to viscera and all these things, his ability to like fight and all this, they make him a hero. They're the reason why he's a hero. And then I also love this tragic idea of Ichabod, where he is trying to save the world, but if he succeeds, he's going back to a world that considers him a villain. And even in all of that, he does it anyway. Like, he's still knowing that if the world he goes back to will be a better place overall, but be worse for him, he still wants that world. And I think that is what makes Ichabod such a compelling hero. He's so flawed and dynamic in the fact that like the society thinks he's evil. He killed a bunch of people, but he wants nothing more than to fit in and to like find his tribe and to do the right thing, even if he's doing it for the right reasons. But he doesn't know what that right thing is, and it's always weighs on him that he might be like just killing a bunch of people, and that this might all just be a dream.
Yeah, this is why I like this, because it is dark and twisted, and it is thought provoking, and I think there's a lack of thought provoking comics out there, especially in the mainstream. You know, we look at Marvel and DC, and I love both those companies, and they have some great artists and writers there, but a lot of what they put out there isn't thought provoking anymore, and there's no real consequence. And it's this idea that Ichabod could be completely right, and maybe he's not crazy, or he's completely crazy, and what is a monster is not necessarily a monster, but another human. And we get to really play with that psychological aspect. You know, we see movies like Shutter Island, and even One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, and things like that. And that plays with things like that. In some degree, Inception, we could argue as well. And I'm on a Leo drive right now in my life, so I don't want. I'm watching The Wolf of Wall Street too, which is a problem. Maybe that's why I'm thinking this way, but I digress. But even still, what is that like? Because this, in many ways, is bringing mental awareness. And I don't know if that was your intention or not, but
It wasn't my
really
intention, but it was
thought-provoking.
certainly a thing that I'm very proud Ichabod has done. It took somebody that could easily have been. One of the things I'm most proud of about Ichabod is the character could have easily been a caricature of what we assume for mental health. Like it could have been a caricature of like a psychopath or the bad guy or the good guy. It could have it could have praised or demonized these Ichabod, or it could have made him or it could have made it so that like, oh, you totally like you that Ichabod did no wrong and like it totally justified. And I think what I love about Ichabod the most is that it walks this line between understanding that all mental illness, including the ones that I deal with and lots of people deal with, like is a fine line. Like there's no black or white, you know. Most people in their life are doing the best they can on every day. Is everybody doing the best that they can on every day? No, probably not. But most people are trying their best, and most people are caught up in things that are beyond their control. And you know, it's not Ichabod's fault that like he's done some of the things that he's done, but he does have to live with the consequences of having done them. And that line is something that is very important to me when it comes to this book. While still, and what's hard about it is being able to balance this while still having like an high octane action adventure, which that was like, I didn't want to have something that was cerebral, only cerebral. I wanted to have this element in the background that if you looked for it, you found it. But really, like Ichabod is like a nonstop thrill ride. It's like fighting and action and like new people and monsters and magic and like mythology, and it's all thrown at you like over and over and over again, like washing over you. And in the background, as it washes over you, you get this like glimpses of Ichabod's life, what it could have been, what it was, what he dreams about, what he hopes about, what the other characters dream about, how he tries to interact with them, and all of that is very important to the story, that they all work together. Because I think if it was just like some cerebral tome about this character that like was a cast off from society, then people that loved action would not like it. And if people that if it was just the action, like, oh, look at this serial killer now, like killing a bunch of people and being the hero with like no consequences, then a lot of people that want that extra cerebral part of it wouldn't like it. And it's how they work together that I think speaks to all of my work in some way, but especially Ichabod and that special bond that it has with people.
And you mentioned that 5, 6, 7, 8 are sort of done, and volume 2, that's what volume 2 deals with, and then 9 and 10 is going to be volume 3, and that's sort of in the middle / getting out there. So what can people expect with Ichabod? Because the first one's been out for a while. I don't know how long
Yes.
the second one's been out, if it's been out at all.
The
And
second one is going to come to Kickstarter in September. So you can get the first issue at russellnohelty.com by joining our mailing list. And then in September, usually at the beginning of September, but sometime between like the 1st and 14th of September, I'm going to launch that campaign. We have a bunch of hardcovers for Volume 1. We'll be trying to get hardcovers for Volume 2 in the second in the next campaign, and pay back and pay off basically the production costs from Volume 2. Volume 3 should be wrapped in October. Then I will bring that to Kickstarter in March. And then we should finish, assuming they go well, then I will do Volume 4, which will likely be the last volume of Ichabod, depending on... It's very hard to keep this going, like with the suspense of between, like, is he real or we had to actually abandon some of that for Volume 2 and like make it more just an action thrill ride, because like it's just too hard to move him back and forth between stuff. But we still have that in there in Volume 2 and 3. Like, don't worry, we do answer those questions in Volume 2 and 3 about like what's happening, and then it's either going to be 4 or 5 volumes for this big part, and there may be some other stories afterwards. But my hope is that if Volume 2 goes well, then it will give us the budget to do Volume 4, and then Volume 3 will lead to Volume 4 next year in the fall, in October, in September, October again. So for sure, there will be a Kickstarter for Volume 2, because that is 100% done. Like, it's not kind of done. It's like literally sitting on my hard drive. All of the covers, everything are ready to send to the printer if I wanted to do it tomorrow, if I had the budget to do it tomorrow. Volume 3. We finished issue 9. I just got the pages for the first half of issue 10, and then we do about 10 pages a month. So assuming that will be done right around the time that the next Kickstarter ends, and yeah, so I'm trying to stay one volume ahead of people at least, and I'm really, really excited. The response we did a Kickstarter for issue 5 last year, and the response to issue 5 has just been so good. I was so scared, but it introduces the Wizard of the Apocalypse, Necromonica. It introduces some other characters. It answers the question about who was the voice in Ichabod's head and what happened in the apocalypse. It answers a ton of questions people have been asking me for years. And I can absolutely not wait for people to see Volume 2. And then Volume 3 answers a bunch more questions and leads us towards sort of the end of Ichabod and makes it a complete story. Because the end of Volume 1, I think you could call a complete story, but it's really not complete. There's a lot of questions, and I want to make sure that when I finish it, A, it's satisfying, and B, Ichabod gets the ending that he deserves. And then we'll probably do a big omnibus of Ichabod, maybe with a couple more issues or maybe an extra issue of content or something the following year. Again, I'm planning in the future. I hate doing that, but my hope is to get Volume 4 finished around this time in 2021, and then finish it out in September. But I don't know. I don't know if Ichabod's going to leave in 4 volumes. What tends to happen is I had 7 volumes planned out, and then volumes 2 and 3 were smashed into Volume 2, and then volumes 4 and 5, when I wrote them, kind of smashed all together in Volume 3. And so I'm assuming that Volume 6 and 7 will smash together in Volume 4, and then we will have 16 issues, which I think is a very respectable amount of issues for an independent comic. And if there's still I have a really, 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 really cool idea for if everybody loves Ichabod and demands that I bring him back. But I can't talk about that until at least until we finish volume 4 at least.
Well, we're going to table Ichabod then, and we're going to talk about something that's a lighter note, and I might get it wrong again, and that's Jerkin Boy in that entire comic, and the dollar something slipping my mind here.
Gherkin Boy and the Dollar of Destiny was an experiment. So I'm a writer. I'm not an artist. But I thought that I should draw a book. I should at least draw one book so that I could see what it was like to try and replicate panels and figure all out. I thought it would make me a better writer, and it did. So I can't draw. But what I can do is absurdism pretty well. And so Gherkin Boy and the Dollar of Destiny is about all the things that I can draw, at least reasonably. So it's about a pickle who falls into a black hole and sets it on an adventure across the world to get back home. There is a fork, a lecherous fork named Forkster. There is a felonious thief named Stick 'em Up, who's a stick. There is a naked professor. There is a eyeball alien. It is, I don't know. It's probably not the most bizarre comic that someone's read, but it's pretty friggin' bizarre.
So to talk about that, because it is out there, it's very interesting to read. It's very interesting to take a look at. And so I'm very curious, given that you're not an artist, what was that experience like, and what was the biggest takeaway? Because a lot of writers are probably listening to this, and a lot of people who are into indie comics on both sides of the aisle, whether they're an artist or they're a writer. So what was that takeaway for you? Because you said it made you a better writer, so I'm really curious on that.
Wow. Yeah, so it was like as I mentioned, it was a thought experiment because I wanted to, like, I ask artists to do a lot. When you're writing, you ask a lot from you're writing maybe 20 words, maybe 100 words, maybe 200 words, and that's a day, maybe 3 days of work for an artist. So I really wanted to see like what that meant and how tedious the work was, because it was very even there's the characters do not stay on model for like the whole book, but even just doing what I did, it was so tedious to go back and make sure they were on the right sides, to storyboard and plan out the panels, to do all of that work, and to think about how to draw something that I wanted, that I spoke, or that I thought was so different from just writing it. And so it showed me just how difficult the job is. Like, I knew how difficult the job is, but when you do it, you really see how difficult the job is. And you really see how hard it is to make a comic page, because it's one thing to do a pinup, which I still stink at, but I'm considerably better than, and what kind of work goes into like every single panel. It's a fascinating a thing to do if you just have some time to really put some thought into it. You don't have to, like, not doing stick figures, but like really trying to do the comic, because I don't know how artists do it. I understand how they do pinups. I don't understand how they stay things on model and don't like scream and then have to flat and color the whole thing. But it also helped me tell a story. It was the one thing that I've done that, like, I didn't have an editor for. I didn't have an artist for. My friend Thomas Bacon, who did the colors for Katrina Hates the Dead, also did the colored the cover. And that's the only help that I had in the whole thing. So in my novels, I have editors and proofreaders, but I did the lettering. I did the whole thing. And it showed me, like, for instance, in lettering, like, why I need to have space. It showed me how to think about a page of comic, even when it looks ugly in pencils, but how it will look when the actual page is done, and how I have to think about it when I look at even the sketches. And all of that sort of coalesced in this specific book. that I wrote before Pixie Dust, but after Katrina Hates the Dead. And I figured if I was going to be editing people and I was artists and I was going to be writing more stuff and hiring artists, that like I owed it to them to walk a mile in their shoes. And this is my attempt to walk a mile in their shoes. And honestly, like, I mean, it's sold more comics than most independent comics have sold. It's sold several hundred copies of comics, which I literally cannot imagine. Like, it's sold at least, I think last count it was like 350 copies. And so now when someone says my comic doesn't sell, I'm like, I don't know how bad it must be, but like Gherkin Boy sold. So I've got to assume there's a audience for it. And it really proved that there's an audience for any book. You just have to go out and find them.
And jumping off of that point into something that is probably more personal and it's a little bit outside my taste. So I'm not a big horror guy and that kind of scares me. I like to sleep nice at night. But you worked on 2 anthologies, Monsters and Other Scary Shit and Cthulhu is Hard to Spell. And I would imagine that your work on Gherkin Boy really helped with this because now you have a better understanding of how everything works. Because when you're working on an anthology and you're managing people and you're managing different creative teams, even if it's for just 8 pages or so, you know, it's a lot of work. And I read a bunch of anthologies and I speak to a bunch of people who work on anthologies, and what they say is that it comes down to the editor. And I think that Monsters had 30 stories with 50 creators and Cthulhu had 35 with 70 creators in it.
And the second one, Cthulhu is Hard to Spell, The Terrible Twos, had 38 with another 70 creators. So one thing that Gherkin Boy did was like it like solidified in people's minds that like I will go the extra mile. They're like, oh, like you can talk as an artist even though you're not one because you drew a book. Like I did it. Like it definitely solidified some sort of indie cred that either I felt like I didn't have before, or most writers would not go to the level of like trying to draw like a book just to like get in the minds of like the artist. Monsters and Other Scary Shit is interesting because most of the stories aren't actually scary. Most of them are humorous. The impetus for Monsters and Other Scary Shit was that I wanted to work with a bunch of my friends, and I would literally never be able to hire them all because I work on maybe one project at a time. Often I'm not even working on one like Ichabod was the first book I had worked on in maybe 2 years on like a full-time, like full-on basis. I do have projects that I work on, collaborate with artists on. Like I've worked with Angela Odling, I've worked with Erica Lervold, who are long-term collaborators with me, and a work that I'm doing with Nicholas Torres. But that's kind of like in their own time. Like we're working on it together, so like I'm not funding those books. But even then, like most of the work that I do in comics is with a very small amount of people. I can count on my 10 fingers and a couple of toes how many people I have actually let draw my work in comics. And so, and that's over a 10-year career. So you're talking about 12, 15 people maybe have ever touched my work. And I knew that, like, given that, I would probably never be able to work with almost anybody that I really wanted to work with. So Monsters and Other Scary Shit was my desire to work with all of my friends who like loved monsters and monster comics. And it was also another proof of concept because I figured that if I could bring a bunch of people who loved monster comics to my work, then I would be able to like level up and like be able to like do a big work. I did not expect it to raise $27,000 on Kickstarter. I hoped it would, but like I did not think that it would. And so that really showed me a ton about editing. Like that book is raw. I will call it raw. Like I had never edited something before, really. I did not know what to look for in collaborators. I just knew like I liked these people and I wanted them to be part of it. I made some sort of theories of the case and it worked out. And some people love that book, but it's definitely uneven in a lot of ways. But Cthulhu Was Hard to Spell was my attempt to correct all of those unevennesses. And the book was, I mean, people really love monsters and other scary shit, and I do not blame them because like I love it too. It just is all over the black and white, color, prose, even pages, odd pages, things that start on the left side, the right side. Like it's a lot. Um, I would never hand that book to an editor and be like, this is a good example of how to perfectly edit a book. But Monsters and Other Scary Shit, on the other Cthulhu is Hard to Spell is the book that I would hand to an editor and say, I am as proud of this book as any human being should ever be as an anthology, especially the second volume, because I took all of the good stuff about Monsters and Other Scary Shit and I asked people what they hated, and I fixed it. I made it all ages appropriate. I made it all color. I made it all comics. I made sure everything started on the right-hand side instead of the left-hand side, which was a problem from the last anthology. I brought all of the weird sort of energy that I have. So my love for mythology meant that the Cthulhu is Hard to Spell book does not focus on the horror. It focuses on the monsters and mythology of Lovecraft and themselves. So I've never seen an anthology about Lovecraft that actually focused 100% on the monsters. As the focal point, and so I've seen monster manuals and such that did, but I've never seen an actual like book that was a book that did that. And what I wanted to do was show that Lovecraft was for everybody, and so I opened it up. The first one was invite only. This one was open submission. I had so many people come back from the first book to the second book, and it was wonderful to see their progress. Some of the stories continued from 1 to 2. It was just overall a wonderful experience, and I think that book is crisp and clean and well done. And whether you like horror or don't like horror or just want to laugh or you want to cry, there's something for everyone in that book. And one of the most wonderful things people have said to me about the first volume is, I love Lovecraft and I loved it. And also people that say, I didn't know anything about Lovecraft and I loved it. And people that said, I don't love horror and I loved it. And people that said, I love horror and I loved it. So it really had a little bit for everybody. And I tried to make that flow so that if you loved Lovecraft, there were some real deep cuts, like Ornan Numqua in Marriage Counseling is a thing you just would not see in a you would have to know that Ornan Numqua are like the Ross and Rachel of the Lovecraft universe. My story about Azathoth and the elder gods that lull him to sleep, wanted to start a rock band. You have to know that Azathoth is the god that if his eye opens, then if he wakes up, then the world comes to an end. You have to know that the elder gods circle around him. You've got to know a lot of deep cuts to get all of the things. But if you just want to see a silly story about a bunch of gods who want to start a rock band, then you can do that too. And so I try to bring that from the first volume to the second volume. And there are some amazing stories. And Chris Simon, to her credit, made the anthology so much better when I brought her in to edit. She helped so much, from selecting a lot of the stories to helping just guide the process through with me and taking a lot of the pressure off. But it's kind of our love letter to Lovecraft and our love letter to comics. So all of us really became a family in those books, those 3 books. And it's been a wonderful experience to be around them and to have something that everybody can enjoy, and to have something that, it's very hard in comics because your stories aren't always printed in the nicest way. And they aren't always the community that you want, and like the creators aren't always treated very fairly. And I try to do all of those pieces. I try to make sure that the artists and the writers, everyone is happy. They're all friends. They're all a community. That it really is a love letter from something we love to something that they love. And yeah, that's sort of the ethos of my work as an editor, and the whole company. Like my whole company is about the community of wannabes and like what I can do for them and what they want and how I can serve them and how I can make books for them. And sort of the best example of that are the Lovecraft books and the anthologies that we do, because like literally they are fan service. The fans tell us who they want in the book, tell us who the cover is, like they tell us so much stuff. and then we really make it for them.
And given that we're talking about all of this, where can people pick up copies of these books? Because I think that's the most important thing, because you've been selling it all throughout this entire interview, and I think people want to figure out where they can buy it.
So if you want to check out my comic work before you buy, the easiest thing to do is go to russellnohelty.com. You join my mailing list. You get an ebook of Ichabod Jones #1, Katrina Hates the Dead #1. You also get a selection of my favorite some of my favorite stories from Cthulhu is Hard to Spell. You get a short story about the first day of the apocalypse called Katrina Hates the Apocalypse in novel forms. You can check out my prose work and see if you like that. And a couple of other things. And then you can see if I'm your jam. I'm very confident that if you love one issue of Ichabod, you'll love all of them, or love one issue of Katrina, you'll love all of them. That doesn't just come from me. That comes from literally thousands of people who bought the books on reading 3 pages of the book. And then they told me how much they loved it afterwards. Same thing with the short story. I'm very confident if you love the short story, you'll love everything else. Or if you love the first volume of the first story of Katrina and Demons Follow Behind Us. So you can also find all of our hardcover work at wannabepress.com if you just want to buy. You can find all of my ebooks on any platform or at russellnohelty.com/books. Not book. That'll take you to a different site, but books. And you can see I also do dystopian, sci-fi, mystery, thriller. I've done a whole bunch of stuff in my career, but the 3 things I'm most proud of are the Godsverse Chronicles, Ichabod Jones Monster Hunter, and the Cthulhu is Hard to Spell anthology series.
And support just isn't anymore buying somebody's work. It's also following on social media. I know you have a pretty decent large Facebook page. Are you on Twitter? What is your Facebook page? I should ask. Are you on Twitter? Do you have an Instagram?
I do. All 3 of them are at Russell Nohelty. The best one, though, by far is Facebook, because I post a bunch of memes about like mythology and fairy tales and death and grief and loss and junk and like silly comics and things. So it's easily the best place to follow me, because like you then get a whole bunch of like fun memes in your Facebook feed. The other stuff I post sporadically. I don't really post on Instagram because I don't have any photos anymore of like me being outside. Twitter, I post very infrequently. I mostly use it to just talk to certain artists and see when I've been mentioned places so I can retweet stuff. So Facebook is definitely the best. But the best is the mailing list, because every week I send an email with free stuff, with my thoughts about comics, with or novels. Like right now, I'm gearing up for our next Kickstarter, so I just sent out our fantasy book sampler for the next to our mailing list people. But yeah, I would say either Facebook or my mailing list, or both. And you can also listen to my podcast, The Complete Creative, on any platform.
Well, I think we're going to leave it there. And just so everybody's watching, there's no excuse not to support. Your podcast is free, from my understanding, and it can be listened. So if you need even more convincing, go check out his podcast, as well as go check out his website. Definitely like the Facebook page, and definitely sign up for that mailing list to get a sample before you buy, because that's the best way how to convince people, in my opinion. Absolutely. At the very least.
Yeah, I mean, look, if you can get someone to read your stuff and love it, like they tend to buy it. It's getting them to actually download it and then actually read the thing to know if they like it that is the hardest part. But that's why I gave one issue of Ichabod, one issue of Katrina. They'll take you 10 minutes, maybe 15 minutes to read each. I gave you a short story and a collection of books from the Cthulhu. So they're very easy to know if you like the taste, then you want more. Yeah, so that is, again, the best place is russellnohelty.com to find all of this stuff.
Well, we're going to end right there. So thank you for being on. I really appreciate it. And I've been looking forward to this interview for almost 2 weeks now. So thank God we did it, and I had a good time with it. So thank you for being on.
Thank you so much. It's always nice to talk about my work and with someone who really enjoys it. So thank you so much for that.
Absolutely.